Todd McFarlane is one of the richest artists in the history of comics. He is the one who bought a baseball for $3 million. But at the same time, his dream of a professional baseball player was shattered at the age of 23. How did a person from another industry become successful and so popular? I went so far as to talk to Todd. The answer I found was probably the last thing I expected. Let's look at the drawings of young Todd. He drew the last one at the age of 16, but it was his hobby. McFarlane's real dream was to become a professional baseball player. There were 3 children in the McFarlane family: Todd, his older and younger brothers. And when 3 boys get together, life turns into a competition. Who will eat cereal faster? Who will jump down more steps? Who will run to school faster? So the competition became a lifestyle for Todd. So it's no surprise that after high school, he goes to community college because of its baseball team. By chance, he meets 13-year-old Wanda at one of the matches. It seems like it was love at first sight, a love that would revolutionize the comic book industry. But more on that later. Baseball shaped his character. This sport isn't about emotions. He has one goal: study the statistics, rules, and do everything to win the game. And Todd was made for it. But one day his dream was crushed. Why? In a match against arch-rival Washington State University, he suffered a serious ankle injury. It meant the end of his career. The only thing that still brought pleasure was drawing. So he got a job at a comic book store so he could live in a trailer town with Wanda. At the same time, he attended comics festivals. He was most impressed by Jack Kirby, how he kindly spoke to the fans who swarmed around him. At that moment, he seriously thought about becoming a comic book artist, but he doubted. He hasn't played baseball in almost a year, and now someone wants to give him one last chance to become a professional baseball player. So, he comes out in a Toronto Blue Jays jersey to play his first game after a long layoff. It will be the last game in his life. Baseball taught him to be competitive. McFarlane was also a hell of a risk taker, and so he had a plan to become a comic book artist no matter what. How to do it? Write to every comics editor. He literally sent 300 letters with his works. And you know what? None of them hired him. One day, Todd comes home from practice. Beloved Wanda meets him outside their trailer and shouting,
"Who's taking a heart?"
He wants you to call him back.
"Hey, this is Todd McFarlane." Yes, Todd, it's Steve Englehart. Would you like to join us in the studio?" "Of course, sir." What did he feel? Let's ask him.
Like, okay, it's just another game of competition.
Todd McFarlane's very first job in the comics industry was working on Coyote. He did the illustrations for the minor story of the 11th issue. But after 4 months, the book was canceled. It took years for Todd to get a job, and now he's unemployed again.
Unfortunately, Tim, and this is where sometimes one person's break is another person's tragedy. An artist on another book who was a fit human being, was super awesome artist, I followed him, was a health freak, drank some unpasteurized milk, went into a seizure and had an allergic reaction and died.
Oh my God.
And so I get a phone call and they go, "Hey, Todd, my artist just passed away. Can you come on and help us for a couple months?"
In late 1986, Todd was commissioned to draw the Incredible Hulk. But let's see who Todd is as an artist. McFarlane understood his weakness in the fact that he was a mediocre artist. He needed to stand out. Therefore, he often used non-standard arrangement of panels, close-ups, and high detail. Todd paints every brick on every building. He adds additional beams, fills the entire picture with thin lines. If you compare it to other comics, I think you'll see that it has this energy and dynamism and intensity that sets it apart. At this time, only a few guys are doing such a showy job. One of the most influential was Jim Lee, whose popularity grew with the Punisher War Journal. He was known for his style. Mr. Lee knew how to create beautiful people and a dynamic narrative. This is especially noticeable in large shots, for example in issue 4, Lady's Reaction. From such shots, it's especially noticeable that it was inspired by the manga. Jim was one of the first to implement this style in comics. Todd couldn't draw as well as this, but was more colorful and risky. So, after the Hulk, the editor passes his drawings around the Marvel offices and tells them that the restless McFarlane is looking for new challenges. At that time, the legendary Spider-Man begins to fall in the sales charts. Todd was warned to stay away from Spider-Man's office, and of course, Todd went there.
Hey, it's 1990. Let's make it look like it's 1990. Oh my gosh, Todd, you're a genius.
He was hired as the new artist on Spider-Man, and Todd made him amazing. At first, McFarlane made the hero more of a spider than a man. His web changed, his eyes grew larger, and most importantly, they added a new villain, Venom. Todd gave the bloodthirsty Venom a massive frame and a razor-sharp smile. And you know, it was a wild success for McFarlane. No one has done anything like this in the last 20 years. Spider-Man sold 2.5 million copies, knocking the X-Men out of first place. Who do you think was the editor of X-Men? Bob Harris. He got this job because he boosted sales of the Incredible Hulk a few years ago by taking a chance on an unknown artist. He was Todd McFarlane. And now, Todd has surpassed the Marvel editor himself. Now, Harris was looking for the next McFarlane to boost X-Men sales, and Jim Lee was to become that person. And what did Todd get? Constant pressure.
Oh, all the things that I was doing artistically to help move it from number 22 to number 1, I was getting pushback from the corporate entity up above, and the executives up above, and the editor-in-chief up above, that you can't do what you're doing, Todd. You're messing with the icon. That's not how we do it. Stop making his eyes so big on Spider-Man. Stop making his costume so dark. Stop putting him out, jumping out of panel. Then he goes, stop that spaghetti webbing.
Because of this, McFarlane had either restlessness or a lack of obedience. Maybe it was youth. He wanted to be independent and prove against all odds that he was the best. So when Todd was done with Superman, he got an itch. He helped draw covers for the New Mutants and met a young man on the project. McFarlane saw himself as a young man in him. He was just as rebellious, energetic, hungry for success. This young man's name was Rob Liefeld. In one of the interviews, McFarlane calls Rob his brother. And indeed, their relationship looks like between an older and a younger brother.
You want to teach him a little about anatomy?
Anatomy?
Yeah, come on, you're the king.
I don't know the anatomy. You know anatomy?
I'm not exactly an expert on this stuff, you know. I'm known to fake it a lot.
Todd spent a lot of time with him and taught him the best skills. Thanks to it, Liefeld released the first issue of X-Force, which sold 5 million copies. It seems that the younger brother has surpassed the older one. This is madness. Bob Garris recently passed the best magazine to Jim Lee, and now a youngster is breaking the record. By the way, what is Jim doing at that time? Literally a month after Liefeld's success, Lee relaunches X-Men magazine. I think you know that it was a new record with sales of 8 million copies.
The only time I ever got beat was Jim Lee, right? That guy, he was my competition. So, like, I was Magic Johnson, he was Larry Bird, okay? And so we had a rival, but we liked each other, and we got along.
Jim was a company man. He loved working for a large corporation. He was entrusted with the best Marvel magazine and given complete freedom of action. And McFarlane felt that he was not respected. Marvel used his designs on a t-shirt or a poster and didn't even send them to him. That's why Todd wanted blood. He wanted to cause Marvel as much pain as possible. So what's your plan, Todd?
Think of it like a sports team. So you lose a free agent, you'll go get another player. But what if 10 of your players on a championship team quit the same year? That would be detrimental to that competition of that team.
What if you start your own company? Rob said. This was what McFarlane needed. Todd realized what they had to do to destroy Marvel. Yes, take away the best player of the company, Jim Lee. So they fly to New York to convince him to join them. Jim looked at Todd and replied, "I think I can do it." Because of such an important person as Lee, most of the best creators of comics agreed to leave Marvel.
Marvel Entertainment fell 3 1/4 today, closing at 49.5. 8 artists are jumping ship for a competitor. Some investors did the same.
So, 3 of the most successful artists united and another 4 supported them. We're missing a lot of Image's history, but each of the artists deserves a video of their own. As for Jim and Rob, they were interested in the financial component. They saw that the income from t-shirts and posters was huge, and they were not getting any of it. So the biggest Marvel artists calculated how much they need to sell their own comics. It was absurd.
Out of 100% of the Spider-Man pie, or any Marvel comic book pie, we were getting 4%. Okay, so 4%. So that meant that we could now sell 1/25th the amount of books. 1/25th. But since we were getting 100% of the 1/25th, it would equal financially the same 4%.
When the time comes for Rob's Image Youngblood comics to be released, it doesn't go beyond 125 copies. It has sold over 1 million copies and was the best-selling independent comic book of all time. The Image guys were getting insanely rich and famous.
100 people lined up for hours outside a Hollywood, California comic book store to buy a signed copy of Youngblood.
And there would be people lined up around the block, helicopters, spotlights, the whole thing.
The Image look would define early 90s comics, and fans couldn't get enough.
This is out there, Youngblood. He's the man behind the nation's best-selling comic book, folks, Rob Liefeld.
For a brief moment, comics commanded center stage in pop culture, and the Image boys were the headliners.
And what does an ambitious baseball player do at this time? He makes a deal with himself that he won't work on another book until he's done a minimum of 50 issues of Spawn. And who is Spawn? This is the same picture he drew when he was 16. This is the main work of his life, and you will soon understand why. The first issue of Spawn was a game changer. Production values were higher, the paper quality was better. Spawn had an interesting, but not unique, story about a twisted boy from hell. He was cruel. The comic almost always had a gloomy atmosphere. Everything that kind of gives a pressure on you. You see these wonderfully rich, painfully sick characters. This kind of brutality was lacking in the market. Spawn was an immediate hit for Image Comics. He bypasses even Liefeld's Youngblood. If you think that Todd is now making money and vacationing in the Bahamas, you're wrong. Although there were such problems with other artists.
I am telling you, we took kids who were making 30 grand and they do a book for us and we were handing them a check on their first book, $500,000 for one book. And then couldn't get them on the phone. Why? They're in the Bahamas. They've got a bicycle. They've got a motorbike. They're like, what are you talking about?
It seems that the freedom and success that the boys fought for began to hold them back. For example, Liefeld, who constantly disrupts the deadlines for the new release of Youngblood. It took him a year to publish 5 issues. Another problem is that Spawn has become an Image icon. This especially infuriated Rob and Jim. In Marvel, they were the best, and now Todd has taken all the applause again. Despite the conflicts, the Image is developing. At that time, Marvel had problems with sales. This is as Todd wanted. He did everything to make them suffer. However, the new management of the company was looking for a radical way to change the situation. So they came up with a crazy idea. What if they buy Todd McFarlane? They contact him and offer him $3 million for several releases. Why should I? Are you out of your mind? But someone else accepted the offer, and someone else was Todd's closest friends, Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee. It was a betrayal of Image Comics at a cost of $3 million for each. McFarlane was angry with his friends, especially Rob, whom he treated like a brother. Now, Todd took every opportunity to smear his name. McFarlane was helped to survive this betrayal by a person who was in the shadows throughout the entire video. This hero has been with Todd since he was 17 years old, cheered for him in the stands, supported when Todd got 300 rejections. Now Todd is abandoned by his friends, holding only the Spawn comics in his hands. Do you remember what the deformed guy from the comic does when he gets to hell? He decides to fight and rebels against all hell for the sake of his beloved Wanda. Wait, isn't that Todd's wife's name? Yes, she is Wanda.
For a lot of years, you were asking me about my work schedule. I've been able to, because of my success, been able to back away from it, but for a lot of years I had to put in those. And
those long hours.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So who is Spawn really?
Who's Spawn? He's essentially Todd. He's me.
At that time, Marvel declares bankruptcy. Rob is being chased by the Captain America he drew. Lee sells his company to DC, and Todd, as always, takes risks. He wasn't afraid of the collapse of the industry, but diversified his business in a related direction. Thanks to the cartoons, movies, and toys, Spawn has maintained its popularity. All the while, McFarlane succeeds. The Image was so popular, Todd's toy business was revolutionizing the action figure market, and he became a serious rival for large companies that produce toys. As for Rob and Lee, they reconciled. Everyone is doing their own thing now. Todd is in business, Rob and Lee continue to create comics, and Wanda remains Todd's most important person.
I am amazed that she continues. That she continues to deal with it.